This is Katie Cantrell with Factory Farming Awareness Coalition. She's here to speak today about the impacts of animal agriculture on the environment. And so I hope everybody enjoys the presentation.
Okay.
So here's Katie.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming. So again, my name is Katie Cantrell. I'm the founder and executive director of the Factory Farming Awareness Coalition. We're a local nonprofit based in the Bay Area dedicated to talking to people about the impacts of our food choices. Here's an outline of what we'll be discussing today, the basics of factory farming, what that term means, an overview of the environmental impacts, and we'll conclude by talking about potential solutions. So, while some of this information is disturbing and depressing, I promise that we will end on an upbeat note. And there will be little cuteness interludes in between each section to give you a chance to ask questions. Now, how many of you sang Old MacDonald when you were kids, or maybe you're singing it with your own children? So when we walk into the supermarket and look around at pictures on products, it looks like Old MacDonald's farm is still around today. We see all these rolling green hillsides, all those happy cows. But unfortunately, this is not what farming is like anymore in the United States. Rather than Old MacDonald, this is what we have today. Factory farms are technically known as concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. It's a practice of keeping thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of animals in confinement for their entire lives. This is done to produce the most product for the most profit. Before we go any further, does anyone want to guess how many animals are bred and killed for food every year in the United States? If you don't already know the answer, anyone want to take a guess? Okay, so pretty close. So yeah, there's actually 9 billion. There are between 9 and 10 billion animals raised and killed for food every single year in the United States alone. This is just land animals, not even counting fish. So there are more farmed animals in the United States than there are people on the entire planet. Now, of these 9 billion animals, what percentage of them do you think are raised on factory farms rather than on those nice, small, Old MacDonald type farms? 80%? About 99%. So 99% of meat that you see nowadays in restaurants or supermarkets is going to be coming from these factory farms. Now, if we've heard the term factory farming, it's usually in the context of animal welfare. And that's not what we'll be focusing on today, but I do briefly want to discuss what conditions look like on factory farms, because that's also what contributes to most of the environmental problems as well. And I think it helps to understand the mindset of factory farming, which is really summed up best by National Hog Farmer magazine. They said the breeding sow, which is a mother pig, should be thought of and treated as a valuable piece of machinery whose function is to pump out baby pigs like a sausage machine. So these are no longer thought of as living sentient creatures, they're thought of as units of production. It is this mindset that allows us to treat farmed animals in ways that we would never dream of treating our dogs or cats. So again, the hallmark of factory farming is this intensive confinement. The animals spend their entire lives sometimes confined in cages or crates, so small that they cannot even turn around. Other industries like the turkey industry, they're kept by the thousands inside of these sheds. So this obviously causes extreme problems for animal welfare. They can't engage in even the most basic of natural behaviors. But it is also this overcrowding that causes the environmental issues as well. So for the rest of the presentation, you have to keep in mind that these are what conditions look like on factory farms, where 99% of meat is coming from. Now, one question that frequently comes up is, what about the labels that we see on products that seem to indicate they're coming from better places? So I want to quickly go through what those mean. I'll start with cage-free. This is a picture of a cage-free egg farm. Now, it's true, these hens aren't in cages, but it's not exactly what we imagine when we see the term cage-free, see those happy-looking chickens on the front of the carton. So it really means just that. They're not in cages, but they're still kept by the tens of thousands inside of these industrial sheds for their entire lives. Unfortunately, conditions on free-range farms are very similar. So technically it means the animals must have access to the outdoors, but there are no real enforced specifications for what that means. And there are a lot of loopholes as well that let farms get away with keeping their animals confined by the tens of thousands inside of these sheds. But if there's access to the outdoors, like a tiny little door that opens onto a dirt patch, it can technically count as free range, even if not a single animal ever actually steps foot outside. Now, to give you a real world example, the wording on the left is from a package of Judy's eggs, which is a popular organic free range brand from right here in Northern California. It says these hens are raised in wide open spaces in Sonoma Valley, where they are free to roam, scratch, and play. While on the right, you can see an aerial photo of what Judy's farm actually looks like. Those are those industrial sheds with tens of thousands of chickens. There aren't any birds outside. And the purple that you see in front there is a manure pit, which we'll be talking about much more in a few minutes. Now, Judy's actually settled a lawsuit with the Animal Legal Defense Fund for misleading consumers with the claims on their packaging. So they have changed the wording, but they're still certified free range and organic. And in fact, they rebrand under several different brand names, which is a very common practice to make consumers think they're coming from these nice little individual family farms when they're coming from the same source, these factory farms. So they sell under Judy's, Uncle Eddie's, Rock Island, Gold Circle. They're also a leading supplier for Whole Foods 365 brand and Organic Valley. So unfortunately, even some of the most respected organic free-range brands are in fact sourcing from factory farms. The final term that you might see is humane, and this has no legal meaning whatsoever. The USDA does not regulate the term humane, nor do they regulate the term natural. So any company can put these on any product. It's really just a marketing gimmick. And it's unfortunate because these companies are taking advantage of consumers' desire to buy products that are coming from a better place. We don't want animals to be mistreated. We don't want to impact the environment in negative ways. But unfortunately, this is usually just used as a mechanism to increase the price when they're still coming from factory farms. Animal agriculture is one of the single most destructive industries on the planet. I know this can seem a little bizarre if we're still imagining Old MacDonald's farm. What could be so bad about Old MacDonald, right? So I'm going to walk you through it. So again, keep in mind that there are 9 billion animals raised and killed for food every year. And this is where most of the environmental problems stem from. It's the sheer number of animals that are required to make enough meat for 300 million plus Americans to eat meat every single day, often with every meal. And the problems come from the fact that these are 9 billion living, breathing, eating, pooping animals. Now they're eating primarily corn and soy. When we imagine farmers and farmland in the US, we imagine growing crops to feed to people, right? But in the United States, over half of all farmland is planted with corn and soy, and most of that is going to feed not people, but to animals on factory farms. This is a problem for several different reasons. One is that animals are actually a very inefficient source of food. So imagine that you are raising an animal for food. From the day that that animal is born till the day that you slaughter it, you have to feed it, right? So that's days, weeks, months, potentially even years that you're giving this animal food every single day. So if you add up all of the food that you give to that animal over the course of its lifetime, it ends up being anywhere from 2 to 15 times more food than the amount of food that you get from eating that animal's flesh. The latest studies have found that if we cut global meat consumption in half and we used all of that farmland to grow fruits and veggies for people to eat directly, rather than growing that corn and soy to feed to animals on factory farms, we could feed every single person on Earth today, plus an extra 2 billion people. So we hear a lot of talk about how are we going to feed the growing global population? And in fact, we could do it easily if we were using our land more efficiently by eating lower on the food chain. This land use is a huge problem globally as well. Meat production is actually the leading cause of the Amazon rainforest being cut down. We can see that here in this infographic from the Center for Biological Diversity. Every minute, there are 2 acres of rainforest clear cut to make grazing land for beef cattle or land to grow corn and soy to feed to animals on factory farms. This is also a problem in the United States as well. Oftentimes people think, I don't want to support factory farms, so I'm going to buy free-range beef. Now there are a couple of different problems with this. One is that actually most beef cattle are free-range for the first 8 to 10 months of their lives. So if you drive, especially in Marin, Petaluma, that area, you might see these bucolic-looking cattle grazing on hillsides, and it looks very nice. But most of those cattle are then shipped to industrial feedlots, where they're fed corn and soy intensively for the last few months of their lives to fatten them up to reach market weight. The other big problem is that while there are certain ecosystems that do benefit from having grazing ruminant animals, there's a limit to how many animals that land can sustain. It's called a carrying capacity. And when you exceed that, you start to have these very serious ecological problems. And that's what we're seeing across the West now. So cattle are being grazed on public lands. So the government is basically subsidizing this grass in order to graze these free-range cattle, but the Bureau of Land Management, which manages this land, is not ensuring that it's being managed properly to prevent these environmental problems. So you have too many cattle on this land, so they're eating everything that comes up out of the ground. They're eating what would grow into shrubs and trees to provide habitat for native animals. This also causes soil erosion, it impacts waterways. So a lot of different devastating impacts of overgrazing. And to make matters worse, there's a very secretive government agency called Wildlife Services. They're a part of the USDA. And in 2015, they killed over 3 million animals, mostly at the request of ranchers. So they're killing off predators like wolves, bears, coyotes, foxes, mountain lions that could kill the livestock. They're killing off prairie dogs and ground squirrels that could dig holes that the cattle could fall into, even rounding up and killing buffalo, so native ruminant animals, because they're competing with the cattle for feed. So we're destroying these entire native ecosystems in order to make them suitable for free-range cattle. Now, another big problem with all of these animals and all of these crops is that they're very water intensive. Now, when we think about ways to save water, what are some things that come to mind? What are ways we're told to save, we can help save water?
Less water in the shower.
Yeah, take shorter showers, right? That's a classic one. Turn off the tap when you brush your teeth, right? Water your lawn less. So all of these suggestions focus on our direct water usage. In this next video clip from the movie Cowspiracy, we'll see how this compares to the water impact of our food choices.
I found out that 1/4 pound hamburger requires over 660 gallons of water to produce. Here I've been taking these short showers trying to save water, and to find out just eating one hamburger is the equivalent of showering 2 entire months. So much attention is given to lowering our home water use, yet domestic water use is only 5% of what is consumed in the U.S. versus 55% for animal agriculture. That's because it takes upwards of 2,500 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef.
The single best way that we can help save water on a daily basis is through our food choices. So the numbers they use there are on the high end, but even the more conservative estimates show that switching from a hamburger to a veggie burger, just one single time opting for a veggie burger instead of a hamburger, you save as much water as not showering for 1 entire month. So all of that water, all of this corn and soy, also a lot of hormones, pesticides, antibiotics, are fed to these 9 billion animals. It goes through their system, and then what happens to food after we digest it? It comes out as poop. Farm animals in the United States produce 130 times as much poop as the entire US human population. And there is very little waste infrastructure for factory farms.
Follow me. One of America's biggest secrets is that farms practically don't exist anymore. The animals we eat are grown inside giant hidden factories. Since 2012, I've been secretly planning a project to expose these factory farms using the highest tech spy equipment available. Drones. This video provides just a sample of what I saw during only a few days of filming. You're looking at a lake of toxic pig feces and urine, the size of 4 football fields. That's because thousands upon thousands of pigs are inside of these buildings. Their waste falls through slats in the concrete floor, and it's flushed directly into this giant open-air cesspool. How many of these kinds of factories are there? In North Carolina alone, there are over 2,000. And the consequences are disastrous.
The waste falls through the floors. It's flushed out into an open pit, like a cesspool. It's easy for a big hog operation to have as much waste as a medium-sized city. Of course, the pit will fill up, so it has to be emptied, and they're emptied by spraying the liquid waste.
Yes, you heard that right.
If you're familiar with a garden sprayer, they're gigantic versions of that. So they're making droplets, fine mists out of this liquid waste, and that can drift downwind into the neighboring communities.
I shut my hog operation down and I got out of it. And I just couldn't do another person that way to make them smell that. It is a cesspool that you put feces and urine in, a hole in the ground that you dump a toxic waste in. And I've seen dead hogs in them and stuff like that.
People can't open their windows, they can't go outside.
I've seen it. I've talked to the people. I've seen the little children that say, Mom and Daddy, why we got to smell this stuff? You get stories like, I can't hang my clothes out. Feces and urine odor comes by and attaches itself to your clothes. And then people will say, we're scared to invite neighbors.
It can, I think, very correctly be called environmental racism or environmental injustice, that people of color, low-income people, bear the brunt of these practices.
This is where they spray animal waste on us. This is about 8 feet from my mother's house.
What is it like when the mist is?
It's like, you think it's raining?
Really?
You think it's raining. We don't open the doors of the windows, but the odor still comes in. It takes your breath away. Then you start gagging, you get headaches.
There are a number of studies of asthma and asthma symptoms, particularly in children near these facilities. Among adults, there are reports of several types of upper respiratory symptoms. These pollutants are affecting people's blood pressure.
Who's responsible for all this? Smithfield Foods, specifically the subdivision Murphy Brown, which controls the factory farms shown in all of the drone footage in this video. Smithfield is by far the largest pork producer in the entire world. And inside these buildings, there is something else entirely.
Pigs are really intelligent animals. They are more intelligent than dogs, they are more intelligent than cats. In the average pig barn, there could be hundreds, if not thousands of pigs crammed into this one sprawling indoor space. Their entire life is spent standing on concrete floors. Mother pigs are locked in metal cages so small that they literally cannot even turn around for months at a time.
This is not a partisan issue. We are all opposed to children being made sick, to animals being abused, and to everyday people's lives being ruined by the stench of cesspools in their backyards. These thousands of lakes of toxic waste must be among the most bizarre and disturbing environmental phenomena that have ever confronted America. And they've been kept well hidden from the public for long enough.
So you've just seen what happens to all of this waste. It's fairly shocking, right? And for urban consumers, meat starts at the supermarket, it starts at a restaurant. We don't ever have to see or experience the real impacts of it. So it's usually these rural, low-income communities, often communities of color, that bear the brunt of the rest of our meat consumption. They're the ones who have to be exposed to this environmental pollution on a daily basis. The other huge problem with all of these animals and all of this waste is climate change. A report from the United Nations found that animal agriculture creates more greenhouse gas emissions than all of the planes, trains, and cars in the entire world all added up together. Part of the reason for this is that ruminant animals like cows and sheep, lambs, actually burp methane, which is 20 times worse for climate change than carbon dioxide. The poop from all of these different types of animals, chickens, pigs, all the ones that we've seen, releases nitrous oxide, which is 300 times worse for climate change than carbon dioxide. And there are also all of the impacts of that deforestation. When you consider the whole life cycle of everything that's required to produce the meat, the deforestation also plays a large role because they're cutting down forests that would otherwise be absorbing CO2. So when you factor in all of these things together, you see that our food choices are also the single best way that we can help shrink our carbon footprint on a daily basis, just like our water footprint. So one study found that not eating meat just one day a week saves more greenhouse gas emissions than buying local food 100% of the time. A different study found that if everyone in the United States ate no meat or cheese just one day a week, it would be like not driving 91 billion miles or taking 7.6 million cars off the road. So we can think about, what are the chances that we're going to convince 7 million people to sell their cars and never drive again? Probably not going to happen, right? Whereas getting people to not eat meat just one day a week, choose a PB&J instead of a turkey sandwich and a veggie burrito instead of a beef burrito, it's one of the easiest and most effective ways that we can help stop climate change. And in fact, there's more and more scientific evidence showing that we cannot keep climate change to a level that's conducive to human civilization without addressing the carbon footprint of agriculture. So this study found that the agriculture-related emissions alone, if we continue our current practices, especially as the global population grows and demand for meat goes up worldwide, then agriculture alone will take up almost all of the global carbon budget by 2050. So this means that even if we got every other industry down to carbon neutral, but we left agriculture the same, we would still be hitting that 2-degree target. So the only scenario that would reduce emissions in 2050 compared to 2009 levels is what they call the healthy diet scenario, which is switching to significantly more plant-based protein. And as an added benefit, eating more plant-based protein also has positive impacts on the health of citizens and on healthcare costs. So if Americans transition to a plant-based diet, not only would it reduce food-related greenhouse gas emissions by 79%, we could also avoid 460,000 deaths and save $289 billion in healthcare costs and climate change costs. So one of the reasons that people eat so much meat is that it seems cheap, but that's because the true costs of it are externalized. So we don't have to see the environmental costs, the healthcare costs when we go to the store, when we go to the restaurant, but as taxpayers, we are actually paying the true cost. And the most effective way to reverse that is to transition to a more plant-based diet. The basic solution is very simple. We have to eat less meat. That's really what it boils down to. And different organizations, world leaders, are starting to catch on to this and starting to encourage people to switch to plant-based protein. So the United Nations Environmental Program has urged first world citizens to cut our meat consumption in half, become what they call demetarians. The Stockholm International Water Institute has gone even further and said that we need to limit animal-based foods to just 5% of our total daily calories. Right now, they make up about 30% of the standard American diet. So they've said we need to eat just 1/6 as much meat as we currently are. And they've warned that if we do not do this, then we will be faced with food and water shortages worldwide that could lead to civil war. So the stakes are about as high as they get when we're talking about things like climate change, global famine, and all of this can be impacted directly through our food choices. Now, a big challenge is how do you get people interested in eating less meat? There are a lot of reasons that people eat meat. It tastes good, it's cheap, it's convenient, it's part of our culture, it's part of our habit. And so now different organizations, nonprofits, as well as many different food startups, especially in the Bay Area, are working on ways to get people excited about eating more plant-based protein. One initiative that's been very successful is Meatless Mondays. This was actually started by Johns Hopkins University as a public health initiative. As we saw a few slides ago, healthcare costs are hugely impacted by the amount of animal protein that Americans currently consume. Many of the leading causes of death, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, stroke, are directly related to eating too much animal protein. So they figured if people eat even 1/7 less meat, if people are not eating meat 1 day a week, then it will really help people's health. And many other organizations have jumped on board and said it's a great way to help the environment and animals as well. And even for die-hard meat lovers, the idea of not eating meat just 1 day a week is something that seems very doable. And currently 1/3 of Americans report trying to participate. Green Monday is also another really successful program that is similar to Meatless Monday, but really focused on those environmental impacts, emphasizing the fact that the best way to go green is by eating more plant-based protein. It's actually based in Hong Kong, and they've had tremendous success in shifting the entire city's eating habits by having a really positive, empowering campaign, emphasizing that eating green, choosing veg options, is a very effective step to take. And Green Monday emphasizes that, it's not a one-size-fits-all. So oftentimes people are deterred from taking a step because they think that they won't be able to be perfectly 100% vegetarian or vegan. And so people get dissuaded and they give up. But as Green Monday shows, there are a number of different ways that we can go about this. So whether that's routine-based, 1 day a week, so Green Monday or Meatless Monday, you can do every day for lunch. Eat a vegetarian or vegan lunch. Just 1 meal a day, it's pretty doable for most people. But if you do that, then 1/3 of the time you'll be eating veg. It can also be portion-based, so decreasing the amount of meat that you're eating, increasing the amount of plant-based protein, vegetarian foods on your plate, or it can be impact-based, so pledging to only order veggie burgers instead of hamburgers from now on. There are many different ways that we can play around with our food choices and increase the amount of plant-based foods that we're eating. And it, again, is one of the single most effective actions that we can take. there are also some very exciting tech solutions that are in the works right now, namely clean meat. So clean meat involves extracting stem cells from animal tissue, culturing those, and then basically growing meat tissue in the lab, and then layering that to produce hamburgers, chicken nuggets. So it is actually meat. I mean, it is animal tissue, and it's based on medical technology used to grow human skin cells to graft onto burn victims, but they're actually growing meat. And this is successful. Memphis Meats has produced just, I think about a month ago, they had the first tastings of clean chicken and duck meat, and there are a few other companies that are working on beef as well. And this is extremely more efficient than factory farming. So clean meat uses 99% less land, produces 96% less greenhouse gas emissions, and uses 96% less water. And there's a really great organization called the Good Food Institute that is working to help encourage the science behind clean meat and policy around clean meat as well. So according to the latest estimates, it should be on the market within about 4 to 5 years. Again, the technology is there. It's just a matter of scaling it so that it's cost competitive with factory farm meat. But I think this is one of the most hopeful developments. If we can replace fast food meat with clean meat, then we will see drastic impacts on the environment and obviously for animals as well. But the good news is that you don't have to wait 4 or 5 years to make a difference. There are a number of other startups, all based right around here, that are working on creating foods that have the same tastes and textures that we love, but they are made from more sustainable plant-based sources. So as Biz Stone said, these guys are coming at the meat analog industry not as a novelty, they're coming at it from the big science angle. So these products are not made for vegetarian markets anymore. They're not made for a niche market. They're getting the top chefs, top food scientists to create products that are really delicious and satisfying for diehard meat lovers. So you have companies like Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods, which makes the burger that bleeds, as it's been getting a lot of attention in the press, Hampton Creek Foods, which makes just mayo, cookies, salad dressings, and all of these products you can read articles, see interviews online. They do blind taste tests, and people can't tell the difference. So if the main reason that we're eating meat is because it tastes good, it's fantastic news that there are now products available that have that same taste, the same texture, but they're better for us, better for animals, better for the environment. So it's really a win-win. And this is a top growing trend. This is really the direction that the market is moving. So Food Navigator magazine, Mintel, the Nutrition Business Journal, I mean, they've all documented that Americans are eating more and more plant-based foods. They're interested in it from a health angle, from an environmental angle, and this is consistently one of the fastest growing sectors of the food system. As a result, an even more exciting trend is that meat and dairy companies are actually starting to jump on board. So even Tyson Chicken, their CEO, the CEO of Tyson Chicken, said that plant-based protein is the way of the future. And dairy companies are also investing in plant-based dairy. So Dannon Yogurt, the parent company that makes Dannon, bought White Wave, which makes silk, soy milk, and almond milk. And they're shifting a lot of their marketing budget away from marketing dairy foods towards marketing plant-based foods. So we see this very positive feedback cycle where the more that we vote with our dollars and we buy these products, the more appealing that food sector becomes to businesses. They invest in it. Then those products are more widely available, they're cheaper, they're more accessible, and so more and more people start buying them. And as we've seen, especially with products like almond milk, then they start to take up a larger and larger market share. And as a result, there are fewer animals bred and killed for food every year. So oftentimes people say, but I'm just one person, what difference do my food choices really make? But we really can have a very direct impact on this industry. And especially at a time when federal policy is increasingly frustrating and alarming. You know, there's zero chance of federal action on climate change within these next few years. So this is even more important that we can really directly impact this industry, have a real impact on climate change through our daily food choices. And it's really never been easier or tastier to eat these plant-based foods. So Gardein products are probably my favorite. They have these great crispy tenders, and they're actually owned by the company that makes Hungry Man dinners. So again, we see these meat companies starting to invest in plant-based products. Almond milk is available at every supermarket. Ben & Jerry's now has 7 flavors of almond milk-based ice cream. So we see, again, it's a growing trend, which is great for all of us because it makes it so easy to do. And again, you know, you don't have to be 100% vegetarian to order a veggie burger or a veggie burrito. You don't have to be totally vegan all the time to put almond milk in your cereal instead of cow milk. It's not about being all or nothing, 100% perfect. It's about looking at the impacts of our food choices and deciding what we want our money to support. And the other good news is that, again, this really has a direct impact. So supply and demand applies. Demand has been going down. Since 2007, demand has dropped. And as a result, there are 400 million fewer animals bred and killed for food now than there were back in 2007, as a direct result of people like you and me deciding to eat less meat. So remember that every time you decide not to eat an animal product, you are taking action against one of the most destructive industries on the planet. We'd love to get your feedback on the presentation. So just a quick survey. And if you'd like to sign up for our mailing list, we send out just once a month newsletter with recipes, national news about factory farming, petitions to sign, things like that. And we'll also send you some recipes and some further resources, but you can also fill this out anonymously. Oh, so the question was, is there a good place to find the sources for the studies that I've cited? Or more information? Yeah, so we have all of the citations for our presentation available on our website. And we actually have unfortunately, I don't have any with me today, but we have a new leaflet that's focused on the environmental impacts, and there's a page with citations for that also available on our website. So those have all of the original studies that we're citing from. The movie Cowspiracy is also a good resource, and they have a website with a lot of information as well, specifically about the environmental studies. For more information about food sources and what to eat, nutrition, all of that, chooseveg.com is a really fantastic resource. They've got meal plans, tips for eating out, all the nutritional info that you need. Yeah. So the question is, what's the relationship between the animal products consumed in the US and what is consumed around the world? So, it's a pretty complicated relationship. It depends on the industry, but roughly 15% of products here are exported. So Americans we have the second highest meat consumption in the world. We're actually passed by Australia. But we do eat most of those products here. Some of it is exported. We do import some products as well. And a lot of these companies they started in the United States, but they're now multinational corporations. And actually Smithfield, which is the largest pork producer, was bought, basically a majority stake was bought by a Chinese company. And so now we are starting to see an increase in pork exports to China. So now Americans are having to deal with the environmental pollution, and these products are exported. Another huge issue is alfalfa feed. Alfalfa is the most intensive crop in terms of water, and Saudi Arabia and other countries are now they're importing alfalfa from the United States. So they're basically importing water. And this is a huge problem because a lot of that alfalfa is grown in Southern California and Arizona and parts of the country that are facing these droughts, and our water is actually being exported to support the dairy industry in the Middle East. And the US is also, we have set this example that if you're well off, the lifestyle that other people want to emulate as their income grows is that meat is an integral part of living well. Eating meat every day shows that you are middle class, you're upper class, and so there's a cultural impact as well. And I'm hopeful that we can change that, if we can show that the United States is saying, actually now plant-based protein is the way to go. This is a really exciting way of the future. Then hopefully countries that are starting to ramp up their meat production will shift to plant-based protein as well. I also have some resources here for you that we can pass out. So this is a guide to cruelty-free eating. It's got some great recipes, nutritional info. And then if we have any athletes in the room, this is a compassionate athlete. So there's this idea that eating veg is feminine or it's hard to get enough protein, but this is David Carter. They call him the 300-pound vegan. He was an NFL player, actually played for the Raiders, and he's totally vegan, so good info in there as well. Again, we're the Factory Farming Awareness Coalition. This is our website, and we give presentations. This is really what we do. We're focused on grassroots education, so if you know of any other schools, community groups, businesses, faith communities that might be interested in learning more about this issue, we're always happy to come out and speak for free. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for attending.